The land had always been more than property. It was memory. It was legacy. When Amir stood at the edge of the wide, untouched field his father once called our future, he could still hear the echo of dreams murmured beneath the wind. Plans to build a family retreat, maybe a small organic farm, something pure. The will was clear. 37 acres of flat, fertile earth passed down with love and pride. It had been 2 months since his father's passing, and Amir was finally ready to visit the land again. The grief had dulled just enough for him to act. He drove down the narrow country road that bordered the west side of the property and turned into the gravel path his father had carved years ago. The familiar crunch of tires on loose stone felt strangely comforting. But as he approached the old iron gate, his heart slowed. Something was off. There was movement in the distance. Heavy machinery, people, construction equipment. He squinted, thinking maybe it was roadwork or power line maintenance. But no, beyond the gate, inside what should have been his untouched land, were rows of half-finished houses. Identical beige boxes with uniform roofs and prefab windows. A small forest had once stood there. It was gone. He got out of the truck. Stunned, how could there be houses, dozens of them in his land? He walked down the gravel with hesitant steps. No signs, no welcome booth, no construction banner, just chaos. Workers yelling over engines, cranes lifting beams, and the thud of hammers ringing out like gunshots in a dream. Amir approached one of the workers who barely glanced at him. Amir asked, "Who gave you permission to build here?" The man shrugged. "Talk to the foreman." It took 10 minutes to track him down, a stocky guy in a reflective vest who looked irritated the moment Amir started talking. "This is private property," Amir said. "You're trespassing. Who authorized this?" The foreman pulled out a clipboard and flipped through papers, then looked him dead in the eyes. "This development is part of the Oak Ridge community. Expansion. Check the county records. It's all approved." Amir's stomach dropped. Oak Ridge, he'd heard of it, a sprawling HOA-run neighborhood just past the highway. He remembered reading articles about how they were expanding aggressively. But this land? His land? "I own this property," Amir insisted. "It was passed down to me legally. I have the deed." The foreman didn't argue. "Take it up with the county," he muttered. "We're just following orders." Amir left the site, his hands shaking as he started the truck. He drove straight to the county assessor's office. What should have been a routine verification turned into a nightmare. The clerk behind the glass window frowned as she pulled up the digital file. "According to these records," she said, "this parcel was rezoned and sold to the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association 6 months ago." Amir couldn't believe it. "That's impossible. My father died 3 months ago. He never sold it. I have the original deed notarized." "Then you'll need to file a dispute," she said flatly, handing him a form. That night, Amir sat in his living room, surrounded by papers, his father's will, the original deed, photographs, land surveys. His mind raced. Someone had illegally claimed the land and they weren't just sitting on it. They were jamming 75 houses into it like a machine stamping out profits on a conveyor belt. It wasn't just a fight for property anymore. It was personal. It was war. The next morning, Amir returned to the site, this time with a folder full of documents in hand. He didn't care if he looked angry or obsessed. He was angry, and for good reason. His land had been swallowed without warning, buried beneath a wave of concrete and corporate greed. But what startled him most wasn't the construction, it was the strange sense of permanence. The houses were going up fast. Foundations had already been poured. Lumber frames lined the property like skeletons. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a full-scale operation. As Amir stood watching in disbelief, a sleek black SUV pulled up behind him. Out stepped a middle-aged woman in a navy pantsuit, flanked by a man in business casual with a clipboard. The woman walked with the brisk, unbothered confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone sharp, like he was the one intruding. "This is my land," Amir said plainly. "You've built houses on it without permission. I need to know who authorized this." The woman gave him a tight-lipped smile. "My name is Diane Cooper. I'm the president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. This property was acquired for Phase 4 of our community development. All approvals are in place. No, they're not, Amir snapped. This land was never sold. My father left it to me. I have the deed, I have the will, and I've already filed a dispute with the county. Diane didn't blink. Then let the courts handle it. But in the meantime, we have deadlines, contractors, and legal ownership under our records. We're not stopping. The coldness in her voice sent a chill down Amir's spine. She wasn't worried, not about the law, not about the morality of it, nothing. To her, this was just another plot, another tick on a spreadsheet. Amir clenched his jaw as she turned to walk away. You've got 75 houses crammed into 20 acres, he called out. You know, that's over the density limit. She paused. We were granted a variance from the zoning board. You can look it up. He'd looked it up, or at least tried to. Every time he searched public records online, things didn't match. Parcel numbers were off. Boundary maps had shifted. It was like the entire land had been sliced into new sections overnight. It made no sense, unless someone was manipulating the records behind closed doors. Later that afternoon, Amir drove to a local law office recommended by a friend. The attorney, a young man named Khalid, listened carefully, flipping through the copies of Amir's documents. After nearly an hour of discussion, Khalid leaned back and exhaled slowly. Someone definitely pushed this through fast, he said. Zoning changes, variances, reassignment of ownership, it's all possible if someone inside the system wants it to happen. You're looking at a coordinated land grab, not just a paperwork error. Amir ran a hand through his hair. So what do I do? We file an injunction to stop construction immediately, Khalid said. Then we request a full title investigation. But be prepared, HOAs like Oak Ridge have deep pockets and friends in high places. This won't be easy. By the time Amir left the office, the sun was low on the horizon. The thought of strangers living on land his father once walked made his stomach turn. And worse, those houses weren't built for people who needed homes. They were built for profit. Tiny lots, packed close, cookie-cutter designs. Nothing about them said community. It was just money. The next day, Amir returned with a drone. He captured aerial footage of the build-out foundation pads, sewage lines, electrical trenches, everything. If they wanted to take his land, he'd document every inch of it. And if they thought he'd stay silent, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Amir spent the next few days drowning in paperwork, legal terminology, and endless cups of coffee. The more he dug into the records, the more twisted the truth became. His land hadn't simply disappeared from the county rolls, it had been deliberately reassigned through a web of forged documents and suspicious approvals. What began as a zoning mystery was unraveling into a full-blown conspiracy. He visited the zoning office first, requesting copies of all variances and permits. Related to Oak Ridge's Phase 4 expansion, the clerk behind the counter gave him a wary look, but handed over a thin stack of paperwork. As Amir scanned through it, something immediately stood out. The signature approving the rezoning of his land wasn't his father's. It was a shaky, barely legible scribble one Amir had never seen before. This isn't valid, he said, holding the paper up. It's what's in the file, the clerk said blandly. If you think it's fraudulent, you'll need to take it up with the county records division or the courts. Fraudulent was putting it mildly. Whoever had signed the zoning consent had claimed to be the sole property owner. Despite Amir's father being alive at the time and legally listed as owner, there were also approval letters from the city planning board that raised even more red flags. Names of board members he didn't recognize, meetings that were never publicly announced, and fast-tracked permits issued in record time. Back at home, Amir spread everything across his dining table: maps, deeds, city memos, permit applications. I took photos and uploaded everything to a drive Khalid could access. His lawyer had already filed a CS and dis notice to Oak Ridge, but there was no guarantee they'd honor it. Time was working against them. Every day, more houses rose from the soil like weeds. That night, Amir made a post on a local forum under the title, "They jammed 75 houses on my land. Help me expose this." They uploaded drone footage, screenshots of documents, and a personal Message asking for help. Within hours, it began to spread. Some people were skeptical. Others were outraged. A few even shared their own horror stories about HOA corruption and shady land deals. The next morning, Amir received a call from a woman named Layla, an investigative journalist for a small but fearless local newspaper. She said, "And I think you've got something bigger than a zoning dispute. It smells like collusion between developers and officials. I've seen it before." They agreed to meet at a local cafe. Layla was sharp, quick with questions, and genuinely interested. As Amir laid out the story, she scribbled in her notebook, her brow furrowing deeper with every detail. "If what you're saying checks out," she said finally, "someone high up pushed this through. You can't fake this kind of speed unless the system's working for you." "Or against me," Amir said bitterly. Layla promised to do her own digging, offering to publish a first piece if she could verify enough of the story. "People need to know what's happening in their own backyard," she said. "If they can do this to you, they can do it to anyone." That evening, Amir's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Khalid. "We've confirmed the deed transfer is forged. Whoever filed it used a fake notary stamp. We're prepping for a full injunction." Amir stood in the silence of his living room, staring out at the horizon. Somewhere just a few miles away, strangers were hammering nails into walls that didn't belong there. But now, he wasn't alone in this fight. He had a lawyer, a journalist, and an online community rallying behind him. He just needed one crack in the wall, one name, one mistake to bring it all down. The moment the injunction was filed, the atmosphere around Amir shifted. Before, he had been a lone voice yelling into a void. Now, he was a threat. The HOA, once dismissive and indifferent, suddenly became hostile. That same week, Amir began receiving letters in the melanimous threats, veiled warnings, and even an urgent notice from the Oak Ridge Legal Department accusing him of trespassing and harassment. He wasn't surprised. He had expected resistance. But he hadn't expected how far they would go. His phone rang late one evening. "Mr. Amir, this is Officer Hill from the County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, we've had a report of you disrupting construction.
Workers on Oak Ridge property will need to refrain from entering the area or interfering in any way while the case is under review." Amir felt a spark of rage. "That's my property. I haven't set foot near the site since the injunction." "Just giving you a heads up, sir," the officer said, his tone neutral but firm. "Let the courts handle it." That phrase, "let the courts handle it," had become a bitter echo in Amir's mind. As if justice was some distant machine that might move for him if he pulled the right levers. But the HOA wasn't waiting for the courts. They were playing dirty, and now, so would he. He printed out flyers, took out an ad in the local paper, and went door to door in nearby neighborhoods, especially the older parts of Oak Ridge. He talked to residents who had lived there since before the HOA's expansion. Some were kind, others suspicious, but a few opened up about their own struggles. One man, Mr. Everett, an elderly Vietnam veteran, described how he'd been fined repeatedly for minor violations and pressured to sell his home. "They want uniformity," he said. "Not community. They want control." Another family revealed how they had once filed a complaint against Diane Cooper, the HOA president, for billing inconsistencies and property line manipulation. Their complaint vanished. No hearing. No investigation. Amir began gathering testimonies. Layla, the journalist, kept publishing updates in her column. The land they stole. One man's fight against HOA greed started gaining attention outside the county. Local news picked it up. A regional radio show invited Amir on to speak. Wasn't a natural public speaker, but his anger and passion gave him clarity. He didn't sound like a man seeking revenge. He sounded like someone defending the memory of his father and standing up for the people. He'd been ignored for too long. Then came the retaliation. One night, Amir returned home to find his trucks. Windshield shattered and the tires slashed. Spray painted on the side of his fence were 3 letters. HOA message. Plain and clear. He reported it, but the police wrote it off as vandalism. No suspects. Khalid urged him to install cameras and keep records of everything. "We're getting close," he said. "They're trying to rattle you." But Amir was done being rattled. With Layla's help, he requested records of HOA campaign contributions, zoning board minutes, and developer contracts. The pattern became unmistakable. Several board members had personal ties to Oak Ridge's lead developer. One zoning officer had approved 6 major variances in a single day, all related to Oak Ridge, and the fake deed transfer, the notary listed, had died 2 years before it was filed. Still, the build continued. Workers now moved faster, even at night. Concrete trucks rolled in past curfew, as if they were racing against the law itself. Amir sent out cease and desist letters to contractors warning them of the ongoing dispute. Some companies pulled out, others didn't care, but cracks were showing. Some of the houses remained unfinished. Pressure was working. Amir stood under the stars one night, staring at the horizon where rooftops pierced the skyline like invaders. He knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt winnable, and he had no plans of backing down. The courthouse was silent that morning, except for the distant shuffling of legal aids and the occasional slam of a door echoing through the high-ceilinged hall. Amir sat quietly at the long oak table, a folder of evidence in front of him, heart pounding in rhythm with every tick of the clock. Across from him sat 3 suited representatives from the Oak Ridge HOA, including Diane Cooper herself, looking poised, confident, and completely unshaken. Her smug expression hadn't changed since the day they first met, like she already knew the outcome. Amir's lawyer, Khalid, leaned toward him. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We've got enough here to make them sweat. Just trust the process." Judge finally entered. Dan, older man, with silver-rimmed glasses and a face that looked carved by decades of disappointment. Everyone stood, then sat. What followed were 2 long hours of arguments, exhibits, testimonies, and cross-examinations. Khalid laid out every detail with surgical precision: the forged deed, the non-existent notary, the altered zoning documents. The city officials with ties to the developers. "We are not just talking about a land dispute, Your Honor," Khalid said in his closing argument. "This is a deliberate and coordinated land theft. My client's property was stolen, built upon, and sold, all under the guise of legality. We are asking the court to invalidate the fraudulent transfer and halt all construction immediately." The HOA's legal team countered with their version. They argued that the purchase had been made in good faith, that the documents had passed county verification, and that the construction was well underway with significant financial commitments. Diane even played the community card, painting Amir as an obstructionist, threatening the dreams of 75 families. But the judge wasn't moved. He asked specific questions. Why was the notary stamp tied to someone deceased? Why was the deed filed weeks after Amir's father's death but dated earlier? Why did the zoning board approve a major expansion in a single afternoon with no recorded meeting? Then came the silence. That heavy courtroom silence that hangs in the air when the truth has already spoken louder than any argument. After a tense 15-minute recess, the judge returned. Everyone rose. Amir's pulse raced. "I have reviewed the documentation, heard the testimonies, and considered the timeline of events," the judge began. "This court finds significant irregularities in the deed transfer, zoning approvals, and permitting processes related to the Oak Ridge phase for development." Amir held his breath. "I am hereby ordering an immediate injunction on all construction activities on the disputed parcel. Furthermore, pending a full title investigation, all current development work must cease within 48 hours. Any completed or partially completed homes may not be sold or occupied." Gasps filled the courtroom. In addition, this court is referring all evidence of forgery and misconduct to the district attorney's office for further investigation. It was victory, but a complicated one. The construction wouldn't be torn down overnight. The homes already standing would linger like scars on the land. And the legal process wasn't over, it was just moving to the next phase. But Amir had won what mattered most: the recognition that the land was his. What they had done to him was wrong. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. Microphones were shoved toward Amir, questions flying from every direction. "How do you feel about the verdict? What's next for you in the land? Do you think the HOA will face criminal charges?" Amir paused, then said simply, "This land belonged to my father. It belongs to me. and now it belongs to the truth. That evening he returned to the field. His field hand stood in the fading sunlight, wind brushing against his face. Noise of construction was gone. The silence was beautiful. Not empty but free.